You have never met the person who will try to kill you. You do not know their name. You do not know what they look like. You have never done anything to them personally. They have never done anything to you, but if the circumstances were right, the right scarcity, the right threat, the right moment of fear, one of you might kill the other. This is not a modern problem. It is the oldest human problem there is, and understanding when and why it started and what it tells you about the species you belong to is one of the most important things you can know about being human. Stay with me, because the answer is not what most people expect. Most people assume that war is ancient, that humans have always fought, that violence between groups is simply part of human nature, something encoded in us from the beginning, inevitable, permanent, and impossible to separate from what we are. The evidence says something more complicated and more interesting. Let's start with what war actually is, because conflict between individuals is not war. Two ancient humans fighting over food or a mate, that is conflict. It is old. It is present in every primate species. It is not war. War is something specific. It is organized, coordinated, lethal violence between groups. It requires planning. It requires cooperation within a group directed against another group. It requires the ability to identify enemies by group membership rather than by individual relationship. And it requires something that not all ancient human societies had, something worth fighting over at scale. Here is the archaeological record, the oldest unambiguous evidence of organized group violence, multiple individuals killed together with weapons in a pattern that suggests coordinated attack rather than individual conflict, dates to approximately 10,000 years ago. A site called Nataruk in Kenya. 27 individuals, men, women, and children, found with wounds consistent with blunt force trauma, arrow injuries, and in some cases, hands bound before death. This was a massacre, organized, deliberate, and lethal, and it happened right at the moment, within a few thousand years, of the agricultural revolution. This is not a coincidence. Hunter-gatherer societies, the way humans lived for the vast majority of our existence, are not peaceful by nature. Individual violence exists, raids exist, revenge killings exist, but full-scale organized war, the kind that leaves mass graves, is remarkably rare in the archaeological record before agriculture, and the reason is straightforward. Hunter-gatherers do not have enough to fight over. A group that moves through territory following resources cannot accumulate wealth, cannot store grain, cannot build surpluses that another group could seize and hold, cannot defend a fixed position because they do not have a fixed position to defend. When two hunter-gatherer groups come into conflict over resources, the most efficient solution is almost always the same. One group moves. Territory is vast. Populations are small. The cost of fighting is high. Every adult is essential for group survival. The benefit of moving is immediate. Conflict resolves through avoidance. Agriculture changed this calculation completely. When you plant crops, you cannot move. The crops are here. The food store is here. The animals are here. Everything you have worked for is fixed to this piece of ground. And when your food is fixed to the ground, it can be taken. Suddenly, there is something worth organizing violence around. Suddenly, the calculation reverses. Moving is catastrophic. You lose everything. Staying and fighting is the only option that preserves what you have. And raiding another group's food store becomes the most efficient way to survive a bad harvest without doing the work of farming yourself. Agriculture did not just change what humans ate. It changed the strategic logic of human violence. It created the conditions in which organized war made sense for the first time. But here is what this history reveals about human nature that almost nobody talks about. Humans are not naturally warlike. We are naturally capable of war. That is different. The capacity for organized group violence is in us. The ability to dehumanize an outgroup, to coordinate lethal action, to sustain violence over time toward people who have done nothing to us personally. These capacities exist. They are real. But for most of human history, in most conditions, they were not activated because the conditions that make war strategically rational, fixed resources, concentrated wealth, territorial defense, were not present. War is not what humans do by nature. War is what humans do when the incentive structure makes it the best available option, and that means it can change. The same species that invented war also invented the treaty. The same cognitive capacity for group loyalty that makes soldiers fight to the death for people they have never met also makes humans capable of building institutions, laws, and norms that constrain organized violence across generations. The country you live in right now is the product of that capacity working. So is the war that may have built it. Both come from the same place, a brain that is capable of treating strangers as enemies and capable of deciding, when the incentives are right, to treat them as something else. That capacity is still in you. If you want to know, you know what to do.